Hey there, this is Dan back with another Book of the Week review. This week we're reviewing the title The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone. This book has just been recently released and it's all about the idea of increasing the amount of effort and energy you put into your life to try and get more results. Now, Grant Cardone is a sales trainer, has been around for many years and has recently started a TV show too called The Turnaround King. So you might be familiar with him from that as well. Basically, his area of expertise is one-to-one sales and improving sales motivation for teams. And he has some great ideas about thinking the right way and improving success by putting more effort and energy into everything that you do. So what is the 10X rule? Well, basically Grant says that from his experience, he sees that most people tend to grossly underestimate the amount of effort and energy that's required to achieve anything worthwhile in life. So to achieve any type of success, we tend to sort of estimate how much effort and time we'll need to put into that to get the result. Well, what Grant says is that we actually underestimate by about 10 times what it's going to cost us in effort and energy to get what we want. And what he suggests is actually 10 timesing or 10xing our effort to actually increase our energy and our output to get more out of life quicker. Now, this mindset is very powerful because very often when you set a goal, you're thinking about what you want as a result, but you're not thinking about the effort and the energy and the time that it's going to take to achieve it. So the 10X rule speaks directly to this. It tells you that when you set out to do something, it's going to be tough, and it creates that expectation up front. So it's a very different way of thinking about something, but it creates a better sense of momentum and control in your mind when you're actually setting out to achieve something. So it can be much more motivating to go for a goal, knowing that it's actually going to take time and effort, and being willing to put in that extra effort and energy into what you're doing up front. Now, besides this idea of the 10X rule, there's a lot of other concepts in this book that I wanted to share with you. There's tons of ideas in here, but I wanted to share just a couple to get you thinking and give you a sample of what you can expect when you check out the 10X rule. The first idea Grant shares in here that I really like is the idea that success is an obligation. Now, when you hear that, it might sound a little bit weird, but if you think about it, most people tend to think of success or achieving what they want in life as an option. It's something that would be nice to have. They'd like to have a nice home or a nice car or travel or have a lot of money or success or something. They'd like to have it as an option, as a choice. What Grant actually tells us is that it's an obligation. We have an obligation to ourselves to increase and improve ourselves to reach our potential in life. We have an obligation to our families to provide support and to give them a great life, and we have an obligation to our society to be as high functioning and high performing as we can, because the more successful people there are in a society, the more it actually improves the overall society. So when you think in this way, it kind of tweaks your mind in terms of thinking, I'd like to have these things, into the mindset of thinking it's my obligation to achieve something worthwhile with my life. Now, if you think about other obligations you have in your life, to pay your taxes, to be a law-abiding citizen, to do different things like that, you find that you tend to follow through on your obligations. That's the idea here, that if you think of success as an obligation, you're much more likely to commit to it in the same way and actually take it seriously and improve and increase your performance. The next idea is something Grant calls the 4 degrees of action. Now, this is a really powerful idea. He basically says that people tend to operate at 1 of 4 different levels of action in their life, and we all tend to operate at different levels depending on the different situations we're in at the time. So the first degree of action is doing nothing. Doing nothing is basically where you're being purposely lazy or you're not really making any effort in your life in a certain area. Now, we all tend to have certain areas we might do this. Some people might do it in finances, some might do it in health, some might do it in relationships, spirituality, contribution, whatever it is. In some area of our life, we're not making any effort. Now, the interesting thing is that not making any effort actually takes effort, because you actually choose to be lazy. You choose to avoid or to make excuses or to slack off, and it actually makes you feel a certain way inside. And if you sit too long in the do nothing phase, you'll find that you actually become bored or lethargic in your life and you don't have a lot of enjoyment. So doing nothing is a little bit of a trap that we've all fallen into from time to time, and it's something that we can instantly crack ourselves out of if we know that we're doing it. The second level is what he calls retreating. Now, retreating is where we've basically given up on something in our life, we've become cynical, we've become angry about something, and we're actually going the opposite way. We're almost being passive-aggressive and not doing what we should do out of spite. Now, this is probably the most negative of the type of actions that you can take, but a lot of people live their whole life in this way. Instead of looking for proactive ways or ways to try to overcome their challenges, they actually have given up inside and they're starting to retreat and retract from life. The third level is what he calls average action. Now this is the one that most people tend to sit at and one that tends to be kind of socially acceptable. If you're out working 9 to 5 and you're commuting a couple of hours a day and you're earning an average income and you're doing everything you need to do to get by, that seems to be the acceptable thing in society, and that's the normal level of action. Now of course doing things at this level isn't very exciting. You only get a certain amount of reward. It's usually an average amount of satisfaction of what you're doing. So leaving at the average level is actually a bit of a trap in itself, because you look at other people and you set your pace based on what they think and what they do, and you think, well, I should do that too. And that's the average level of action. The fourth and final level of action is what he calls massive action. And what he says is that he believes that massive action is actually the natural state of things on Earth. And he gives the example of if you were to look in the ocean under the surface, you see a massive amount of action where the fish and sharks and all the different creatures are moving around constantly. They're constantly in motion, trying to find food, trying to survive. And he says if you look into an ant's nest in one of those National Geographic shows, you see this massive amount of action, ants going everywhere, busily doing what they're doing. But human beings tend to follow naturally what other human beings do. And as a species, we tend to actually slow our level of action to match our society. So Grant believes that you should go against this and actually take more action, work more hours, put more energy and effort into what you're doing, and you'll actually get a better result, hence the 10x rule. Now of course when you do this, when you take massive action, what happens is that people around you sometimes get annoyed with you, they tell you to slow down, they call you a workaholic, whatever it is, because it frustrates them to see you actually taking more action and getting more out of your life. So don't be fooled by that. Taking massive action isn't actually the wrong thing, it's actually the right way to feel energized about yourself and get more out of life. The final idea I wanted to share from this book is that fear is a great indicator. And what Grant means by this is that when we have fears in our lives, it's generally because by doing something, we're going to stretch ourselves, we're going to expand our comfort zone, and that causes fear because we all have a homeostatic mindset, something that keeps us in place in our lives. So by actually going towards our fears, by seeking out things that scare us, we're actually stretching our comfort zone and enabling ourselves to have more success. Now obviously if you're following the 10x rule and you're taking 10 times the amount of action and putting 10 times the amount of energy into things, you don't have a lot of spare time to get nervous and worry about things because you're busy making things happen. And Grant says this is great because he believes the thing that fuels fear is time. Too much time on your hands makes you think, it makes you start to worry, and it makes you basically antagonize yourself from the inside out, beating yourself up, worrying about what could happen. Whereas if you're just taking massive action, you find that the fears tend to erode very quickly because you've already passed through the fear and you're on to the next thing. So that's just a quick sample of some of the ideas in this book that really impacted me. As I said, this book is really a great motivational tool. I've read it a couple of times now and I've gone back to it just to kind of refresh a couple of ideas here and there. It's really worthwhile checking out and getting back into. If you're feeling a little bit frustrated or a little bit depressed or a little bit down on yourself, the 10x rule by Grant Cardone is one that's well worth checking out. I'd recommend going out and getting yourself a copy and reading through it and underlining it and reviewing it on a regular basis to tweak your mindset to make sure that you're getting the most out of life. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.